The morning Priya Anand walked into my gym at 6:45 on a Tuesday. She did not look like someone who had arrived by accident. She looked like someone who had made a decision, and the decision had arrived before she was fully ready for it. And she was standing with it in the middle of the free weights section anyway. Before I could say anything, before I could say good morning or what are you doing here, or any of the reasonable sentences available to a man who has just found his work rival standing 12 feet away in a building she did not belong to, she said, "I've been following your schedule for months." She said it the way she said everything, directly, with her chin up, as if saying it first gave her some structural advantage over the situation. Then she looked at me, and I looked at her. And the gym was very quiet at 6:45 on a Tuesday, and the sentence she had just said was still in the air between us, getting bigger. "Following my schedule," I said. "Your gym schedule." She said it carefully, like a woman who has been rehearsing a version of this conversation for some time and has arrived at the one she can actually say out loud. "I joined this gym 4 months ago. I knew you came here. I told myself it was because the equipment was better than my last place." "Is it?" I said. She looked at me steadily. "No," she said. I want to be careful about what I'd believed about Priya Anand up until that moment, because I'd believed it completely and built my whole professional posture around it. She was my counterpart at a competing firm, same specialty, same market, same client pool. And in the 2 years since I'd become aware of her existence, she had beaten me on 3 pitches I'd expected to win, placed second on 2 I'd expected her to win, and said something at an industry panel about long-term infrastructure modeling that I had privately thought about for 6 weeks without admitting I was thinking about it. She was, by every measure I was willing to apply, the most serious professional competition I had. She was also, by several measures I was not willing to apply, someone I had been trying not to think about in ways that had nothing to do with infrastructure modeling. My name is Tom Garrett. I'm 35. I'm a structural engineer at a mid-size firm. I design the bones of buildings, the parts that don't get seen when everything's finished and working right. The parts that only become visible when something goes wrong. There's a discipline to invisible work that I've always found more satisfying than the alternative. I'm not someone who needs credit for the thing being upright. I just need the thing to be upright. My gym is a 20-minute walk from my office, and I've been going at 6:45 on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturday mornings for 3 years. And I had never once told Priya Anand this, and someone had. She was 33. She specialized in the same kind of structural work I did at a firm 2 blocks from mine, and she had arrived in this industry at almost exactly the same moment I had, which meant our careers had grown up alongside each other in the way of 2 trees planted close, aware of each other, drawing from the same light, shaped at least partly by the other's presence. She was precise and thorough and argued her positions in that particular way of engineers who trust the math, not loudly, not combatively, just with the patient confidence of someone who has done the calculation and is willing to wait for you to do it too. She wore her hair in a braid when she was at the office, and down when she wasn't, and she had a habit in meetings of clicking her pen once when she'd arrived at a conclusion before anyone else had. A single quiet click that I had learned to listen for the way you listen for a specific instrument in a complicated piece of music. We had met properly 18 months ago at an industry event, before which I had known her only by reputation and the sting of the Harmon pitch. She had been standing at the window with a drink, looking at the skyline in the way of someone who is genuinely looking rather than performing looking, and I had said something about the Caldwell building going up on the south side, and she had said, "Without turning, the load distribution on the east facade is going to be a problem in 10 years. And I had said I agreed with her, and she had turned, and we had introduced ourselves and talked for 45 minutes about buildings that were quietly wrong, and it had been, without question, the best conversation I'd had in a year and a half. I had gone home afterward and told myself it was stimulating professional discourse. I had a gift for taxonomy. I could label most things with enough precision that the label became a lid. After the event, we were at the same conferences, the same panels, the same occasional industry dinners. We were professional, even warm, in the specific way of two people who respect each other and are competing for the same things and have tacitly agreed that both facts can coexist. She would acknowledge a pitch I'd won with something brief and exact. Never flattery, never performance, just recognition. And I would do the same for hers. And we had built between us a kind of professional shorthand that was more honest than most of what went on at those events, and which I told myself was simply the courtesy of two adults in a small industry who both understood how it worked. I had not told myself what it actually was. I had the lid on tight. 4 months ago, I had noticed someone had joined my gym. Not Priya specifically. I hadn't put it together yet. Just a new member, arriving at the same time I did, twice a week, with the focused purposefulness of someone who has a plan and is executing it. I hadn't paid close attention, which is the honest account and also the embarrassing one, because the reason I hadn't paid close attention was that I had been paying a different kind of attention, the kind that goes deliberately unfocused, that sees a thing and decides not to register it, because registering it would require deciding what to do about it. 3 weeks in, I had registered it. I had not done anything about it. For 4 months, we had shared a gym at 6:45 on Tuesdays, without acknowledging it. She took the section of the floor 30 feet from where I worked. We had nodded on 2 occasions, briefly, in the way of professional acquaintances who have encountered each other somewhere unexpected and are both too composed to make it strange. I had gone home on both occasions and thought about it with more precision than the situation seemed to warrant, and told myself the precision was professional habit and not anything else. And then she walked in on a Tuesday in March and she stood 12 feet away and she said what she said. "Someone told you," I said. "Which conference?" "Patel's thing in October?" "November," she said. "And no, I looked you up. I absorbed that. You looked up my gym schedule. Your firm has a wellness page. You're listed as a member advocate for the gym." She met my eyes. It took me about 4 minutes. "That's a lot of effort," I said, "for better equipment." The corner of her mouth moved. Not a smile, the territory before one. The place she lived in professionally. "Yes," she said. "It is." We stood there. The gym hummed around us, cables and quiet effort and someone on a treadmill not paying attention to either of us. And I looked at Priya Anand standing in the middle of the free weights section with her chin up and her admission still in the air between us. And I thought about a lid I'd been keeping on something for the better part of 18 months. "Why today?" I said. She took a breath, not a steadying breath. She was already steady. It was one of the things about her, but the breath of someone choosing their next word with care. "I have been telling myself for 4 months that this was about the commute and the equipment and not wanting to change my routine," she said. "And this morning I came in, and you were here, and I thought, I am an engineer. I design structures that have to hold weight honestly. I cannot keep building something on a foundation I know is wrong." A pause. So, that sentence did something to the air in the room. I looked at her. She looked back at me with the expression she had in meetings right after the click. Patient, certain, done with the calculation and waiting. I thought about the Caldwell building in 45 minutes and the particular click of a pen that I had learned to listen for. I thought about a lid and what it was actually doing, and whether the thing underneath it was the kind of thing that got better for being contained. "I noticed you," I said. 3 weeks in, I didn't say anything. She was very still. You noticed. You take the far section. You arrive 6 minutes after me on Tuesdays, 8 minutes on Thursdays. You do the same sequence every time except when you've had a bad week, and then you skip the last set and leave 10 minutes early. I held her gaze. I notice when you leave 10 minutes early. The pen-click expression was gone. Something underneath it, quieter, less practiced, had replaced it. That's very specific, she said. I'm an engineer, I said. I pay attention to structures. She looked at me for a long moment. The gym hummed. Someone dropped a weight, and the sound echoed and faded, and the quiet came back. I could see her doing the calculation, not hiding it, for once, just doing it plainly where I could watch. And I let her do it because that was what she needed, and because I had spent 4 months not saying the thing I was about to say, and I was finished with the not saying. The Caldwell Building, she said slowly. You agreed with me about the east facade. I'd already written the same note in my margin 2 weeks earlier, I said. I hadn't told anyone because I wasn't sure it was mine to say out loud. You'd done the calculation. I'd done the calculation, I said. I just hadn't decided what to do with it. She breathed out, small, controlled, but real. How long, she said. Since the conference, I said. November, the one where Patel's thing was. That's 4 months. I know. We've been at the same gym for 4 months. I know that too. She looked at me, the full, undecorated look, the one I'd seen her aim at buildings she was genuinely trying to understand and nowhere else, and she said, I came here this morning because I was tired of engineering around it. I want to be clear that I'm not asking for anything. I just needed the foundation, to be honest. I understood that completely. It was the most structurally sound thing she'd ever said to me. Here's what I'd ask, I said. Not now. Not here, at 6:45, in the middle of a Tuesday. I watched her face. Let me buy you coffee after. We can talk about the Caldwell Building. Or not the Caldwell Building. But somewhere we're not performing being fine for the equipment. The corner of her mouth moved again, further than before. Not quite the full thing, but closer. That's a lot of words for, do you want to get coffee? Do you want to get coffee? I said. Yes, she said. Precise. Clean. The way she said everything she meant. We did the rest of our workouts, which was either the most disciplined or the most absurd thing 2 structural engineers have ever done, and I couldn't tell you which. We didn't talk. We didn't perform not talking either. We just did what we'd come to do, 30 feet apart, in the particular shared focus, quiet of 2 people who have said the necessary thing and don't need to embroider it. The coffee place was around the corner. She took it black. I'd expected that. We sat at a table by the window with the city coming properly awake outside, and we talked about the Caldwell Building and the east facade, and a project she was working on that had a foundation problem she'd been circling for weeks. And I had a thought about it that I said out loud, and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, That's it. That's the thing I've been missing, in the exact tone of someone who has just heard the right answer after a long time, with the wrong ones. I felt something in me shift, not dramatically, just enough. We talked for 2 hours. The coffee got cold, and she didn't seem to notice, and neither did I. At some point, she told me the Harmon pitch, the one I'd lost 18 months ago, the one that had landed the first sting, had been closer than I'd known, that she'd won it by a margin that had surprised her own team, that she'd read my proposal afterward because she'd wanted to understand what she'd been up against, and had thought for a long time about a particular paragraph on load tolerance that she said was the best technical writing she'd encountered in 3 years of reading proposals. I sat with that for a moment. Then I told her that the panel comment about infrastructure modeling had lived in my head for 6 weeks. She said she knew, I said, how? She said the way I'd asked the follow-up question, very carefully, like someone who already knew part of the answer and was checking his math. You've been reading me, I said. You've been reading me, she said. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Outside the city was fully itself now, loud and ordinary. And inside the coffee shop it was just the two of us at a window table with empty cups and the pleasant, specific exhaustion of two people who have been carrying something heavy for a while and have finally set it down. I want to say something, she said. And I want to be clear, it's not a condition. It's just true. Okay, I said. I'm not good at this. She said it evenly, the way she said uncomfortable things, without dressing them up. The non-structural parts. I understand the calculation. I'm less practiced at the building. I'm not either, I said. I'm better at the bones than the rest of it. So we'd both be working from a plan we haven't drawn yet. Yes, I said. She nodded once. Okay, she said. I can work with that. The thing that followed was slow and exact, which was the only way either of us knew how to do anything. We had dinner the following Saturday. Her choice of restaurant, my choice of timing. A negotiation conducted over two texts that managed to be both efficient and something else. She argued with me about a structural specification over the appetizers, and I held my position, and she held hers. And by the main course we had arrived, together, at a third answer that was better than either of ours. And she looked at the napkin where she'd drawn the revised schematic, and then at me with an expression that had no professional category at all. We were careful. We kept the work separate, because we both understood that the work was the work, and what was happening between us was its own structure with its own requirements, and confusing the two would compromise both. She beat me on the Lindfist pitch 3 months in and sent me a message afterward that said only, yours was better on the mechanical, mine was better on the envelope. This result is wrong. And I sat with that for a long time and thought about what it meant to be known that precisely by a person who was also your competition, and decided it meant everything. 6 months in, we were at an industry dinner, and Patel said something across the table that was designed to set us against each other. The way people do when they've decided two professionals who are also something else must be something to leverage. And she looked at him with the patience of a woman who has already done this calculation and found it uninteresting. And she said, Tom and I disagree on methodology regularly. It makes the work better, and she moved on, and I looked at the side of her face and felt something snap into place that I hadn't realized was still loose. Later, outside, she said, he expected one of us to perform. I noticed, I said. I don't perform, she said. I build. I know, I said. It's why I noticed you. She looked at me in the way she had in the gym, the full, undecorated look, and then she reached out and straightened my collar, which had been half turned under all evening, with a quick certain gesture of someone who has already decided they have the right to the small adjustments. The east facade was your note first, she said. It was both of ours at the same time, I said, in different margins. She nodded. That's the part I keep thinking about, she said. Two people doing the same calculation in separate rooms. She dropped her hand. It's a good foundation. It's a very good foundation, I said. A year later, she came to see a building I'd worked on open. Not the structure, the finished thing, the skin and the glass and the lobby that nobody in the public would ever think about from the perspective of what it took to make it stand. She stood outside and looked at it the way she looked at buildings, seriously, and then she said, the east-facing corner. The way the light hits it at this time of day. The load distribution worked out, I said. Better than worked out, she said, and then, sideways, not quite to me, you were right about the thing you didn't say at the beginning. There were several of those, I said. The important one, she said. I looked at her in the afternoon light outside a building whose bones I knew better than anyone and said, "So were you." For the record. She took my hand. Not grabbed, not urgent. The same way she built everything. With intention, without excess. Exactly enough. We stood outside the building until the light changed, and then we walked, and I thought about a Tuesday at 6:45 and a sentence that had been in the air between us getting bigger, and the calculation she'd done that morning before she walked through a door she'd been standing outside for 4 months. The bravest structures, I've always thought, are the ones that commit to the weight they're designed to carry. No hedging in the bones. No apologizing for the load. Years later, when people asked how we got together, she said it started with a confession in a gym that she had planned and then arrived at before she was ready for it, which was the most uncharacteristic thing she'd ever done, and the one she was least sorry about. I said it started with a man who had noticed exactly what was happening for 4 months and had been keeping a lid on it, and a woman who had shown up one Tuesday and refused to let the lid be the whole story. We were both right. The truth was that we had done the same calculation in separate rooms for 18 months, and the morning she walked through a door she'd looked up from a wellness page and said the true thing out loud before she could decide not to. The calculation finally had somewhere to go. Nothing important had appeared overnight. It had simply stopped hiding. What would you have done if the person you'd been competing with for years walked into a room you thought was yours and told you, before you could say a single word, that they'd been finding reasons to be in it? And have you ever kept a lid on a calculation you'd already finished, because finishing it meant you'd have to decide what to build? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.